Welcome to the Angels Win podcast with former Angels broadcaster Victor Rojas, featuring Jeff Stoddart and Chuck Richter. And now it's time to talk about some baseball. Victor, take it away.
All right, guys, it's episode 12. I just want to welcome you to the Angels Win podcast. I'm Victor Rojas along with Jeff Stoddart and Chuck Richter, and we've had some technical difficulties, so if this looked odd at the very beginning, you could blame Jeff for speaking out of turn and not waiting what would have been the bed of the music as we're putting that in afterwards, but that's neither here nor there. Thank you so much for joining us here, whether it's on iTunes or Spotify or Amazon or what is it, Odyssey, anywhere, wherever you catch us. It's glad you could join us. It's we are all encompassing, all welcoming. That is what we do here at Angels Win. And it's been a hectic week if you're an Angels fan. And I know I spoke quite a bit last week about a lot of different things. And I will say that I need to call myself out because I thought for some reason in my head I had this being a 3-game series against the Dodgers. So I said 5 games as the over-under. That wasn't or 6 games, I should say, because 3 against the Padres and what I thought was 3 against the Dodgers instead of 2. Sunday, that's when we're recording. There is no game for the Angels or the Dodgers leading into the All-Star break. So that's my bad. It should happen sometimes. You make mistakes and you just roll with it. But regardless of the situation, it was an awful week. I think it's thankful that the Angels didn't play on Sunday, so they could take the day off and kind of decompress. There's been a lot of things said and tweeted over the last week or thereabouts, and because I did speak at length last week, I'm going to take a back seat this week. I'm going to let Jeff Stoddart pretend he is the host for the week, and I will interject when appropriate. So without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, here's the man, the myth, the legend, Jeff Stoddart. Cheers, Jeff.
I appreciate you giving me a heads up that we were going to do this so that I could get ready.
Yeah, well, there you go, buddy. That's welcome to live TV, live media.
Well, thank you. It was just a glorious week of watching Angels baseball and tweeting live about it with our Twitter followers. There was just lots of love, lots of joy, lots of celebration.
Kumbaya.
Throughout the week. It was it's a time where you just kind of you feel the warmth and you feel the community. Yeah, what a shit show. I think this may be the first episode that we've had, here with episode 12, where we come into an episode not having won a game since the last time we recorded an episode. Yeah. So just brutal from the onset. I sat down for a little bit this morning, as I normally do, to try to put my notes together, and I thought, what am I going to write? What do I say? How many different ways are there to say that we are horrible, we were horrible, things are horrible. We head into the All-Star break a game under 500. I've got nothing good to say, Chuck. You want to polish this turd at all?
There's nothing much to add. You can point to the injuries being a problem, but there have been other teams like the Yankees who have, and just looking at some of their lineups over the past few weeks without Judge and Stanton and then just patching things together, and they are able to keep afloat. So yes, injuries have been a factor, but how much? I mean, is there anything in the depth that has been actually, we're into the second layer of the depth, right? That we've talked about being a positive of the Angels, what Perry Manassian did in the offseason. And we're already in that second layer. And so the only thing that I can say, and I'm not going to polish any more turds than you already did, Jeff, but is there's a little hope in that after this All-Star break, which came at a good time, mind you, the Angels should be getting Neto back, Rendon back, hopefully maybe Drury. Matt Moore back, so I don't know. There's a little bit of that, but then they lose Joe Adele for crying out loud last night. I mean, it's face palm after face palm. It's just this whole week has just been awful. And the only thing that I can really point to, guys, is really just again a much needed break in getting the team healed up. And hopefully there's, a closed door, slam the damn door, kicking over chairs type meeting in the clubhouse. Like, guys, I mean, it's now or never. And if they don't come out of this break red hot, you could be looking at a fire sale type situation where there's nothing left, including Ohtani. So and we'll get to that.
So, Victor, is there anything to that? I think that, one of the things that a lot of people look at going into an all-star break is the pros and cons of going into an all-star break hot versus going into an all-star break cold, right? You go in hot, it's like, oh, now we're killing our momentum. Mm-hmm. You go in ice cold, which they are. They've lost 9 of the last 10. They're the coldest team in Major League Baseball right now. Is there any upsides to that?
I don't know if there's upside. I think Chuck said a lot of different things there, and there's a lot to unpack. And look, I think I've known you guys long enough, and I think I've known you guys at a different level, right? I've been able to talk to you guys. You guys know who I am. I'm not that different on air than I am off air, other than perhaps the colorful language that I may use when I'm not broadcasting a baseball game. Except one time, and that wasn't my fault. I am a realist. At all times, I am a realist. I don't live in fantasy land. I don't like looking at things with rose-colored glasses, because I just think you're just setting yourself up for disappointment, right?
Yeah.
I think at the beginning of the year, this team was better off on paper, and I know we don't play the game on paper, but this team was better off on paper, depth-wise, and going into the minor leagues as well, than they were a year ago. A year ago, they got off to a terrific start, and then injuries started to happen. Everybody kept hope, well, when so-and-so gets back, or when this guy comes back, and da-da-da-da. How'd that work out last year? This year, you're in a little bit of a different predicament, because while you do have some injuries that this ball club is dealing with, the downside or the down slope towards the all-star break for this team happened before key players started to go down with injuries. Okay. I'm not discounting what Matt Moore has done, but he's Matt Moore. He's a twice, 3 times a week kind of guy out of the bullpen for 1 inning. Right. Maybe you stretch him out into the 2nd inning, but that's it, right? Ben Joyce, he was just at the beginning of his, major league career. Zach Neto plugged a hole at shortstop defensively, offensively, still learning. He's a guy that you're not going to sit there with a major league team and say, hey, dude, carry us. I think he'd be the guy to step up and say, I will carry you. I just don't know that he's capable of doing that right now. So to put all my eggs in that basket, I think would be somewhat foolish. I love Zach Neto, don't get me wrong. And I love pretty much every guy that's on this Angels ball club. I like, right? Is everyone keeps talking about, well, Brandon Drury's coming back. Brandon Drury is what he is. He is an $8.5 million 25th, 26th man. Is he an everyday player? He is, because he has to be by default. And it stinks that he's dealing with that shoulder injury. But that's who you're leaning on to turn things around is Brandon Drury and the acquisition or the return of Zach Neto. I just don't know that there's enough in the tank. And I think I've said this pretty much all season long. Dude, I think this is a team that's going to go deep run into the postseason. No, I never thought that. I thought they had a chance to get to the postseason, and then you take your chances because, teams get hot, other teams start cooling off, and then there's matchups, whatever the case may be. But I'm always looking at it from the standpoint of you've already got momentum building, positive momentum building from the minor league system, from the draft, from the development side of things. Why are you going to disrupt that for something that may not happen? Meaning, if I take 2 or 3 of those players and go get Max Scherzer. I remember 2 weeks ago, when the team was riding high and everything is great. This team's going to win the World Series. Let's go get Max Scherzer. The Mets suck, and let's go get Verlander. Like, you're really going to disrupt everything that you've built to this point for a guy that's going to make 7, 8 starts the rest of the way, and perhaps if you get to the postseason, then you might be able to lean on him and Shohei in a short series or just deeper into the postseason. I don't know that makes sense. That's just me, and maybe because I feel like I'm more of a calculated gambler than anything else. I'm not just one of those, full-on risk takers. Just say, screw it, let's just do it. I guess if it didn't matter and my job was on the line, and it's like people are already, the buzzards were already circulating a la Billy Epler, I'd say, yeah, what the hell? What do I got to lose, right? If I'm already going to get canned, I might as well push all my chips in the middle of the table and see if I can catch lightning in a bottle. I just don't think this team is at that point, even if you bring Mike Trout back healthy in a month, whatever the case may be, Zach Neto, because what we've seen for 4 months, 3+ months, 4 months, is a team that on average, for the most part, has been a quasi 500 ball club. Okay. Now, on top of all of that, and they've been that way with pretty good pitching. On top of that, now the pitching has kind of settled into what they are. You go back to June 23rd, they are 29th in Major League Baseball in staff ERA with a 6.64 ERA. So you're giving up 6.5 runs a game. You tell me that lineup with Trout and Brandon Drury, because everyone likes Brandon Drury, and Zach Neto is capable of scoring 7 runs on a nightly basis when your ERA is 6.5? I don't see it. I mean, that's just the reality of it. And I think that's why, look, my feet are firmly planted on the ground. I'm going to root for this team. I want them to turn things around. But I got to zoom the lens out a little bit and look at the big picture. And that's what I meant when I sent the tweet out on, what's today, Sunday, on Friday, whatever it was, Friday, about if the right package comes along for Shohei Ohtani. I absolutely have to consider it going forward because you have no idea what that trade might do. Maybe that is the trade, as many fans may not like it, but maybe that's the trade that catapults the Angels into turning things around the last 2 months of the season, and they still get into the postseason. While you'd like to see it with Shohei, if it's going to set me up not only for the rest of this year, but going into 24, 25, and 26, again, if the right package and trade partner materializes, I've got to look at that. I would be doing myself a disservice if I were sitting in that chair as an organization. If Artie is sitting in that, you'd be doing yourself a disservice to the organization by not, at the very least, exploring the possibility of moving Shohei for a boatload of people. People keep asking me, well, what's a fair trade? I don't know what the fair trade is, but I will say this. There have been trades made for a position player and for aces, pitching staffs, that have been 2-month rentals, guys that have come free agency, impending free agency, and they've been traded. So tell me, what's it worth to trade for 2 months of Max Scherzer and 2 months of Bryce Harper? And then to me, that's where your package starts because that's what you're getting. You're not getting a star pitcher that's going to make 8 to 10 starts the rest of the year and not do anything else. Oh, by the way, he's going to be in your lineup and impact your lineup every single day for 2 months.
Yep.
What's the value of that on both of those ends? Is there a team out there that's capable of putting a package together? I don't know. Or be willing to do that while absorbing a prorated portion of the $30 million that you're going to have to absorb as a team, unless something gets worked out money-wise, because that team's going to absorb the $30 million, the prorated $30 million for those 2 months. And move forward with it. So I know I said I just unpacked a lot for you, but that's kind of my mindset. I'm not saying
Yeah.
blow it up, screw it, this and that. No, my whole point is like, let's look at this. Let's look at this with our eyes wide open, and not just with our hearts and with our
Sure.
gear on, and and the rah. I get that. I get that emotion. I get that sense, and I feel that too. Right? I didn't want to look at the score when I turned it on yesterday. It was 8-0 in the third. I mean, really? Ray Detmers again. You know what I'm saying? And so that's this hope of clinging to this hope of, well, when this happens, then we'll turn things. How's that worked out for the Angels over the last 10 years?
Right.
We're constantly hoping. Sorry.
No, that's
I'm
okay.
done. I'll see you guys tomorrow.
Let me change the wording of what you said, because you had mentioned if a package comes along. So I'll throw this out to both of you. Is it more than waiting for a package to come along? And does the team need to be aggressively and proactively going out to other teams and saying, we want this from you? If you give us this, we'll do the trade, instead of waiting for them, waiting for a package to come along? Or is that too much of a, tip in your hand a little bit at the poker table to show the Angels are gonna ditch him if we can, ride this out and lower the asking price?
Well, sorry, Chuck, I'll let you go. The only thing I'll say to that point is the Angels don't have to ditch him. That's the thing.
Mm-hmm.
They don't. So I don't think you're tipping your hand one way or the other. Nobody's in dire straits right now that, oh my God, we got to get this money off our books to save some money. No. It's just like people talking about, well, Artie's this, and I'm quoting some of these tweets that I've seen. Artie only cares about the almighty dollar. There's no way he's going to trade Shohei and then lose all that money the rest of this year and into next year. Well, next year is a moot point because you have no idea if you're going to re-sign him. That's number one. Number two, and I've said this on various tweets, but people don't read all the tweets because they don't. It's reading is difficult apparently. Money revenue is already booked. It's already in. Single game tickets, season tickets, sponsorships. Most of that money is it's in-house. It's already booked. Some sponsorship dollars, depending on how the contract's set up, you might still have a payment or two remaining, but it's under contract. So they're going to make that payment regardless if Shohei is not. I highly doubt any of these companies decided to put language in there that says if Shohei is traded in season, and maybe it's possible, we get a prorated share back, or you forgive the balance. That's very possible. I don't know that because I'm not privy to those conversations. The only people that get impacted from a revenue perspective as an organization is the impulse buy, the walk-up sales. Families that decide at the last minute, hey, let's go to the Angels game tonight. Those are impulse buys that you're rolling the dice on. You hope that walk-ups on Thursdays, Fridays, and Saturdays. Maybe Sundays are hard at Angel Stadium because it's day games and there's just so many things to do in Southern California. But Thursday, Friday, and Saturday nights, those are the impulse buys that you're hoping to kind of round out your ballpark. Plus whatever they spend on parking, merchandise, and other. That's the only revenue you're talking about. Everything else, it's in-house. So to me, it's negligible. Plus, if you move Shohei and you're saving the 2 months of prorated of the $30 million, to me, it's negligible. It's not enough to move the needle. So I'm sorry to the long-winded response there, but that's how I would like it. The Angels don't have to move Shohei, and I've never said that they have to move Shohei. I said explore it. Why not? Because I think there are teams that are willing to make the move and capitalize on those 2 months and willing to pay the price for it and capable of paying the price for it. But you have to explore it, at least be willing to explore it. That's all I've said.
And I agree. And there's nobody on this podcast that wants Ohtani gone. I mean, let's face it. He's one of the most exciting players to watch, and he is on our team, right? He's but getting back to an earlier episode, where we talked about this, there has to be that conversation with management, Angels management, Shohei's agent, and even Shohei himself. Like, here's where we're at. The narrative in the media is that you want to win we can trade you to a team where you have that possibility, that greater possibility of getting to the playoffs and thriving in the playoffs. But we need to think about this franchise, and we want you back. Like, we want you back. If this happens, you're our number one target in free agency, and we will, I mean, Artie's got resources, he's got money. We will do anything we can to get you back, and we know that you like it here. You picked us, and your team. You love Mike Trout. You love the area. Ipe lives in Southern California, and they do everything together. Are you going to uproot Ipe? I mean, it could be to San Diego or just up the I-5 freeway, but still, I mean, there has to be that conversation regardless. I mean, even if things are in flux and the Angels are winning some games and losing some games, they're playing 500 right out of the gate, but they're still not making really any significant ground in the wild card race. There has to be that conversation with Ohtani, his agent, and because the Angels just cannot afford to let him walk at the end of the year and get absolutely nothing from him. That's just my point.
So, Victor,
other than a comp pick,
right?
A comp pick, yeah,
that's it.
Which is never going to equal to, yeah. So,
Victor, from a behind-the-scenes standpoint, just from your years of working in Major League Baseball and being a part of it, and seeing and knowing what goes on behind the scenes during the times that you were there, would it be unusual for those conversations to not be happening? I understand that if they're not being reported on or they're not being disclosed, both sides are keeping it quiet, nobody's talking.
Which conversations?
But the conversations with the Angels and Shohei and his management team to talk about, what do you want? What do you need? Here's our priorities. Here's what we want as a franchise, as an organization, as it relates to you, and either wanting to keep you right now or to trade you and get some assets and then put all of our eggs into a basket to bring you back in the off season. Mm-hmm. Do you think that they're talking now, or is it more customary that during the season those types of conversations just don't happen?
I think it's possible that conversations have happened. Look, I would imagine at this stage of the season and in Shohei's tenure with the Angels that they have a pretty good feel for each other, right? Relationship-wise, with Nez is Shohei's agent as well, and with Shohei, to understand the big picture. I would hope that they have that at this juncture and not waiting till the 5-day quiet period after the World Series before free agency officially starts, where you have exclusive negotiating rights with that player to start that conversation. So I'm pretty sure that both sides have a feel and understanding for the other and kind of big picture. The same could be said, like, we're having this conversation and Perry and the Angels easily could announce a press conference tomorrow. Well, it won't happen tomorrow because Major League Baseball would frown upon it. Maybe Thursday that, hey, they've come to terms on an extension on Shohei Ohtani. Anything is possible. Anything is possible, right? But I don't think – let's for a moment assume – because that's all it is assumption. Nobody really knows what's been offered, if anything's been offered
right
prior to this year, last year, whatever the case may be. But let's just assume that, that they've had conversations, they've expressed interest, they being the Angels, they've expressed interest, we want you here long term. And now it's, as most guys do at that level, say, well, I'm just going to let the season play out and then we'll tackle it in free agency. I like to think that I am a worst case scenario and I work backwards from there. That's how I kind of just view things. To me, when you get to that point, I don't feel great about it. If I haven't re-signed him yet, I like my chances because if I have the means and the wherewithal to go forward with, 45 million, 50 million, whatever the number is, right? If I have the means to go forward with it, I'll take my chances. That familiarity, having been here 6 years, so on and so forth, will kind of play in my favor. But I will not discount the fact that he wants to test free agency or at least go out in the marketplace, because that's where I think you get bitten. I think that's where you get in trouble. Of like, we'll have our shot, and then sometimes it's one visit, done. Right? They're
Right.
gone. You never get that shot.
Yeah.
So I would, at this point where the Angels are at, that's where I think the conversation is, listen, we absolutely want you back here. We want you here long term. But I hope that you can see this big picture, and what we're trying to do is not only in wanting you back, but to surround you with even more talent, whether it's major league or on the cusp of the major leagues. And I think this is why we're exploring that. It has nothing to do with you. We love you. We love Ipe. We want everybody here. But so that there is an understanding that this is, that there's no malice involved, that they are going forward looking at this from a big picture perspective. And I think I would imagine those conversations, whether it's between the Angels and Nez, John Carpino and Nez, or Nez relaying it to Shohei, whatever the case may be, I'm sure that there are those conversations that do happen, have happened, will happen between a player and an organization, or a representative and an organization. I think you're just smart to do that, unless there's a bad relationship and it's like, hey, see ya when free agency hits.
I'll say this real quick, Jeff. I just want to jump in here. There's this fan narrative, and even with the media, that if Arte signs Ohtani to a $600-700 million, an absurd contract, right? I mean, he's worth it, obviously. That the Angels are then handcuffed to make any more signings to improve the team, and their success is going to be solely based on Trout, Ohtani, the guys that they have, in developing a great farm system and having those guys come through the farm system and produce. Okay. Maybe the conversation needs to happen with Arte and the agent and Ohtani that, hey, listen, I am going to blast through the luxury tax. I'm signing you because I want to be successful you're the once in a generation lifetime player. But my hands aren't going to be tied to improving the team, surrounding you with talent, in addition to having good drafts. Okay. And so I think there needs to be that conversation, because there is this thought that if the Angels sign Ohtani, and Adam Dodge is one of our guys, like, no, you sign him, they're not going to be able to do anything. It's just going to be the Ohtani Trout show and a bunch of guys. Right. And I get that, but Arte needs to invest beyond just Ohtani in what we have. And it sucks that Anthony Rendon has not produced. I noticed earlier, Victor, there was an omission from Rendon coming back from the IL after the All-Star break, because he really just has not been able to stay on the field and really produce other than getting on base via the walk. He's got, his slugging percentage is in the threes, the low threes. It's like he goes up to the plate and he's Juan Pierre without power and speed.
200 games in his Angels career. 200 games played in his Angels career.
Yeah, it's absurd.
Yeah.
So anyway, I'll give it to you guys. That's my take, and I wonder, and I hope that Arte does have that conversation, and he is willing to just push all the chips in and say, "I'm all in, fellas. Let's go."
So here's my not glass half empty, but here's my worst case scenario cap on yet again when you talk about that, right? Because it makes perfect sense. The wherewithal is there. It's a team that has virtually zero debt to it. They've got an unbelievably friendly, club-friendly lease with the city of Anaheim, even though the ballpark either needs to be renovated or a new one needs to be built. Setting all that stuff aside, going into 24, right? You've got 38.5 due to Rendon, 37.1 due to Trout, $13 million to Tyler Anderson. I would imagine they'll pay the $2 million or whatever the prorated buyout on Eduardo Escobar, because you're not going to pay him $9 million next year. Brandon Drury's due $8.5 million. Aaron Loop has a buyout. You're going to have to pay the $2 million to buy that out. Then you've got Max Stassi, Carlos Estevez at roughly $7 million each. David Fletcher's at $6 million. And then you get all into the arbitration guys, right? So let's assume for a moment you're at $50 million. Whatever the number is. It's going to be a dumb number regardless. But let's say you're at $50 million. And let's say you are willing to push the threshold. And Artie's a pretty shrewd businessman. I mean, you don't become a billionaire by dumb luck, right? You've got some common sense. You're not overly emotional, and you make decisions, looking at the ledger, the balance sheet, expenses and revenue. I mean, that's typically how these guys get rich. And while I say that he absolutely has the wherewithal to bust through the luxury tax, the question becomes, how much of that is coming out of his own pocket? Mm-hmm. Because if the revenues aren't there to support a good chunk of that, then it's personally paying for those overages. And it's not just the payroll, it's the tax associated with the payroll and the limitations that are put forth on you going forward. And so that's where I think you start to kind of get, you can do it. You can bump up against it, maybe just go over, because you don't have to go out and get, you don't have to go get everybody, right? If the fruit from the minor leagues continues to kind of ripen, then it's good, right? That's what you want. You want a pipeline of steady young players coming up. Look what the Orioles have done. Fortunately for them, they've drafted and developed properly. And now they've got this pipeline of guys that are starting to come up. And, the Astros did for a good chunk of time. That's why the Astros have lived for as long as they have towards the top of the division. The Rangers are just now. The Rangers, their farm system wasn't that great a couple of years ago, but they've run into some pretty good drafts and, developing guys. And that's why they've been able to go, let's supplement this young core that we have now at the minor leagues with. Let's go get Marcus Semien. Let's go get Corey Seager. Let's go get Nathan Eovaldi. But I guarantee you, they're not just pushing payroll without knowing that the revenue side is going to come in. And I think that's where you have, that's where I have some pause. Look, if any owner wants to sit there and, hey, I'll pay for it. That's like the old George Steinbrenner was the ultimate owner. He didn't give a shit. He's that's who I want.
Jerry Jones.
Jerry Jones. That's who I want. I'll pay for it if I have to. I get luxury tax, no problem. I got it. He'll cover the overage. I don't see that. I have not seen that from Artie yet. Maybe it's possible, but I haven't seen. I've seen the willingness to go out and get the shiny new toy that's on the market, whether that's good, bad, or indifferent. I've seen that willingness to give Anthony Rendon $38 million to go after Garrett Cole, and you didn't get Garrett. I'm going to get Anthony Rendon. I've seen that willingness. It's just the other side of things where there's ramifications, additional dollars spent on top of payroll, where we have yet to see that. And that's where I kind of get a little worried when it comes to that.
How much do you think that what you just unpacked there played into his decision over the, December, January, February timeframe to pull back from selling the franchise and saying, you know what? I'm still hungry for this. I want this to work. I want there to be a winner here. I'm not going to sell. I want to be the owner, the captain of this ship that turns this franchise around and makes it happen.
The money portion of it, the payroll or the willingness to spend to cap and beyond.
Yeah, to go into his own pocket, as you kind of referenced. To you know,
that's a good question.
He could have just cashed out, right? Teams for sale.
Yep.
It increased multitudes more than what he purchased it for.
Mm-hmm.
He was going to have a huge payday, but at seemingly the 11th hour, he pulled back and said, "You know what? I'm not done yet. I want to keep driving this thing forward."
That's funny you say that. And while I'm going to look up an email.
While Victor's looking that up, Jeff, that day when he pulled back may have been the death of many Angels fans on social media and our website.
There was certainly an increase in traffic on the website and our Twitter page for sure.
Oh my gosh. I mean, but to your point, is he all in? I mean, he could have easily retired happily.
Yeah.
Now, there's thoughts that because
I found the email, by the way.
His children didn't want to have anything to do with taking over the reins, right? So it's all in his court and whatever. But I'll let me get to you, Victor. I want this email. Let's hear it.
But no, just to kind of give you some context about what was happening with the sale of the club, right? So I got drawn into this group back in December. I think it was November, December. And, I made contact with GSP Capital, who was running the sale on behalf of Arte and the Angels organization. Had extensive conversations with Brad at GSP. And everyone wants to know what happened. Why didn't he pull back, or why did he pull back? Why did he decide not to sell it? Look, at the end of the day, they went out to market exploring the sale. Automatically, people just assume that he's selling. But if you go back and look at the original press release, I mean, the press release says the Angels and Moreno family is going to explore the possibility of a sale. That's it. That's it. That's kind of how it went, whether you like it or not. But anyways, the process plays out. I'm having this conversation via email with Brad Ketcher, right? And I wanted to have a conversation with him on January 16th. And January 16th. And he can't because he's flying from New York to Southern California because there is a group that's interested in buying the team that had already progressed to the next step of looking at the books and stuff like that. They wanted to walk around the ballpark, look at the facility, whatever. So GSP flew out there, they met with them, so on and so forth. And I've just got this, based on the conversations that I was having, I don't know, there was just something in my gut. And on January 18th, I believe it was a Thursday, at 5:32 in the morning, Central Time, I'm awake and I send him an email. And it's apologies for the early morning email. For peace of mind, I have a couple of follow-ups on my end. Is the sale for 100% ownership? If not, what amount is Arte willing to sell? And then my last question was, will the Angels actually close? Meaning, is there a possibility that this is an exercise in futility because of a change of heart circumstances in the immediate future? So that was at 5:32 Central Time. So that makes it 2:32 in the morning, California time, where Brad is at. The next morning, he calls me before jumping on the plane to fly back to New York. And he basically says to me, he goes, yes, it's for 100. Right now, it's for 100% ownership. And to your last question, man, this would be a surprise out of the blue if there was a change of heart. If I'm not mistaken, that was on a Friday morning, and if memory serves, the press release by the Angels saying that they're no longer considering a sale happened on Monday.
Wow.
So 3-4 days beforehand, I'm sitting here going, man, is he really going to sell this team? Is this really going to happen? And sure as shit, that Monday, because I remember exactly where I was at. Tyler had a baseball game, and I was at the field before the game. And when that press release hit that they were no longer selling. So I say all this because deep down, and people don't want to believe it, deep down, Artie and the Moreno family loves the Angels. He is a huge baseball fan, and he loves the Angels brand, team, so on and so forth. So does Dennis Cool. Artie and Dennis, college buddies at the University of Arizona. John Carpino, another Arizona guy, worked for Artie and Dennis on the billboard side of things. All three guys, that triumvirate that runs the Angels organization, love the Angels organization. So no matter what that dollar figure was going to be, deep down, there's heartstrings being pulled, and I can see why he decided not to. And I'll go one step further for you. I got contacted soon thereafter. Everybody was stunned. GSP was stunned. And I got contacted, I'd have to go back and look, a couple of weeks later by another group. And the question was, do you think a deal can still be done, closed doors? My guy doesn't want to anything leaked. He just wants to go in and say, hey, what's the number? I'll write the check and give it to you. I said, listen, man, all I could do is run it up the flagpole, right? I run it up the flagpole, and it was for 90% of the team because I knew that there was a connection for Artie, right? Keeping at least 10% of it. He's part of it. He's still in the mix at a $3 billion valuation.
Wow.
The team is no longer for sale is what I got. And he got his number. I mean, I guarantee you there were plenty of others that were willing to go to that level. But at the end of the day, it's because he loves that team. And I've said that all along. Nobody wants to buy it. Everyone believes that he hates the team and he's just doing this. No, man, he really wants a ring. He really wants and loves that team. So Chuck, to your point, I think deep down, I think there's a willingness. But you have to not only have the willingness, but you have to have the appetite to stomach that for a couple of years, right? Because it's constantly writing those checks. And how much are you willing to do? Look, all you need to do is go really deep and or win one, and it kind of pays for itself. In theory, it kind of pays for itself.
Sure.
So I don't know. It's kind of a loaded question. I know I went a little bit longer there, but I just wanted you guys to kind of an understanding of where Artie's heart was at in January, February, March. It was with the Angels, believe it or not.
Well, and extrapolating that out, then I've got to imagine his heart is still there. And
no doubt about it.
To your point of him going into his pockets, to me, based off of, by the way, fantastic story and great insight.
That was great. That was good insight.
So listeners, there's your, there's your dollar's worth for the episode. But I mean, my God, if I'm that guy that has that much passion for the team and the sport and what we're doing, and he's not getting any younger. He's getting up there in age. I'm not wishing any bad things on him, but I would think he's at a point where he's starting to see that the finish line is coming. Do you just go, you know what? It's worth it to me. I've made my money. I've done well. I want to see this happen, and I'm going to do everything I can to try to get there.
And I've said that before, Jeff, and I agree. I mean, he's got so much money. At what point can you just have $3 billion on the table and say, nah, I'd rather win? But to my earlier point, if you really want to win, you gotta push through the luxury tax. You gotta surround Ohtani and Trout and Rendon, because we have them for a while, with talent, and just continue to draft well as well. And there's a draft here in a few hours, and there's a lot of position players that can make an impact, almost like an immediate impact like Zach Neto out there. It's a position player, college heavy draft in terms of talent. And the Angels may even draft the best college pitcher and or the best prep pitcher in the draft, because that's how many good bats there are in this amateur draft coming up. So,
hey, just so you know, I was looking back at the calendar. January 18th was a Wednesday. So then the following Monday, the 23rd, is when I think is when the notice came out. As I'm looking up on the January 23rd, LA owner no longer selling the team.
Wow. That was some rich insights there, Victor. Thanks for sharing that. And
no pun intended.
and here's the thing. I mean, and Jeff knows this, and I'm sure you've seen it too, Victor. I mean, Twitter, Facebook, wherever you go, even at the ballpark, in talking to Angels fans, they have such a hate. The vitriol against Arte Moreno is just crazy, and it's not like Jeff and I are sitting here thinking, oh, he's the greatest owner. And he's made a lot of mistakes, and going after Josh Hamilton. You failed to sign Beltre and you signed this guy. And there's been a lot of that, but then there's also Anthony Rendon came
Quick story
off.
on Beltre, by the way. Sorry.
Okay, I want to hear that, by the way. I really do want to hear that. But Anthony Rendon was the World Series MVP, okay? He struck out on Garrett Cole, not because he didn't offer enough money, but because Garrett Cole wanted to be a Yankee. End of story, period, okay? Josh Hamilton, that was a clusterfuck. That was a stupid signing.
But it was one that we all celebrated when it happened.
We did.
Like the stuff that we are judging or grading him on with the benefit of hindsight, I think is often unfair.
Mm-hmm.
Correct.
This guy for the last 10 plus years has done everything that he can in the moment to try to make this team better and go get the big players and, get Hamilton, get Pujols, and for whatever reason, they haven't worked out. But it hasn't been because he's been sitting on his hands and doing nothing.
Well, I will say one thing on that, Jeff. There was a period, and you know this full well, before and even after Rendon, where he didn't go after starting pitching. And starting pitching was a real, just a major hole on the Angels. And in getting good major league depth, right? Like
they weren't developing it.
Because they weren't
drafting or developing.
You could argue too, because they weren't investing too in great scouting and international scouting and but also Jerry DiPoto completely tanked the farm system before he left and quit, I should say. Okay, so there's that. So you have to recover from that. Epler did a good job of starting to rebuild. He's gone. Perry Manassian has done a great job, in my opinion, in starting to build back the farm system as well with our new scouting director, McElvain. So I think that there are some positives, but there is a big, 5-6 year period of time where, dude, we were throwing out the Trevor Cahills and it was a really poor rotation that we were surrounding Garrett Richards with.
Yeah.
Look at that. Victor's fighting.
You said Trevor Cahill. You said no. I was just thinking you said Trevor Cahill, and I remember that offseason when we signed. Was it 4 guys, 4 pitchers?
Oh, Tommy Hunter.
Joe Blanton, right?
Joe Blanton, Tommy Hunter.
We did a 30-minute show at the ESPN restaurant thing at Disney World.
Sean Burnett.
Sean Burnett on. That was our big off season. Talk about making some stuff up as far as getting through 30 minutes.
That must have been hard.
Crazy. It wasn't Tommy Hunter. Tommy Hunter, it was Tommy.
Oh, I'm sorry. It was
the former Brave who just he passed away just a couple of years ago.
I know. What was his name? Not Tommy Hunter.
The redhead. I can't think of his name, but anyway.
Yeah, gosh, dang it.
No, Tommy Hunter was the Ranger guy that I guess
he was on the Rangers.
Rangers and Orioles, Phillies, judo guy. I think he's got a judo background or something like that. But anyways, God, I could picture him and everything too.
God dang it! What was his name? Holy smokes!
Anyways, I'm sure somebody will tell us who it is.
We'll get our research.
I don't want to look. Adrian Beltre, the Beltre story.
I want to hear about the Beltre story.
No, but everyone talks about the Angels didn't sign Beltre, the Rangers signed him away. As the story was told to me by someone very intimately close to the situation, I'll tell you exactly where I was at when I had this story told to me. On the 5 South, before San Juan Capistrano, before you go on the curve, San Juan to San Clemente or whatever, there's a Dick's Sporting Goods store right there on the right-hand side, maybe, and a Best Buy, I think, too. I was in the parking lot, and I was having this conversation. The Beltre thing, as far as the Angels were concerned, was a done deal at 5 years. Done deal. And then after it was a done deal is when they asked for a 6th year. The Angels kind of balked at that 6th year. They shopped that deal to the Rangers, and the Rangers end up signing Beltre to that 6-year, $97 million deal. So the Angels were all in on Beltre, and they felt that it was pretty much done, which I would assume that too if you come to terms on length and number,
right?
Especially the average annual. That why wouldn't you think it's done? But that's not how it happened. That's the story that was relayed to me, and there was no reason. It's not like we were in a media scrum and it was, they're trying to paint this a different way. This was a one-on-one conversation how it was shared to me. So it's interesting how there's a lot of things that people don't know that they just, whether it's media or fans, that they just speculate on, right? Based on their own experiences, based on their own interactions with, whether it's with that person or with a different ownership group.
Yeah.
These guys are just wound differently. Every one of them is different. And you can't assume because one owner does one thing that most owners are going to think the exact same way. That's just not the case. And it's just not how they operate. But
you're right. I remember, and rest in peace, Big Joe McDonald. You remember him, Victor?
Yeah, Big Joe, absolutely.
He wrote a story for Fox Sports saying it was all but done, with the Angels. And then I think that when that 6th year got floated out, that's when it kind of nixed it. Just to make a correction on the podcast, it was Tommy Hanson. Tommy Hanson, and the other relief pitcher in that quartet was Ryan Madsen. Who
spent most of the year on the injured list, if I remember correctly, he was very limited. He was coming off surgery.
Right.
The Angels rolled the dice with him, and he never got it going or got healthy that year. And then the following year, Nationals. Does that sound right? He ended up having he parlayed it into some pretty good contracts. Yeah. And then with the Dodgers too, right?
Right. Yeah, for the Dodgers as well.
Yeah.
All right, guys, we've gone kind of long. We've answered most of the questions that came in through the mailbag just in our conversations, but there's one that I want to get to that was asked by a couple of folks, Sid in Rancho Cucamonga and Cameron in Claremont. And the question surrounds Phil Nevin. So, what is the letter grade that you think that we should give to Phil over the first half of the season? And is he the right guy to continue to, to kind of shepherd this team forward?
A grade? Look, man, you're in any manager going into the season on a 1-year deal. I mean, your back's up against the wall. I just, you're on the hot seat from beginning to end. And to me, it's whether you call him an interim manager or not, that's what you are. I mean, unless you're going to come out and say, he's my guy and here's a 2-year deal, you're always going to consider the manager in that situation on the hot seat. I don't know. Look, truth be told, he's really in his first year as a manager, and first-year managers are going to make mistakes, right? I mean, every one of them does in their first year in the big leagues. Last year, look, man, I don't consider last year anything other than flying by the seat of your pants because it was just an awful team,
They were
an
depleted.
awful 4-month
Right.
stretch where you're just putting out fires. You know what I'm saying? You're not managing. You're just surviving. This
Right.
year he's managing. So I think you've got to give him a little bit more rope. Now, that's just me as a fan sitting here looking at it. I don't know Phil. I've never really interacted with him. So I don't know if he would be my guy. But that doesn't matter, right? It's what really ultimately is what Perry feels is the situation at hand. Is he controlling the clubhouse? Are players receptive to him? The teaching, the whatever the case, the conversations. It seems like he's a pretty good players manager. He protects the guys, but he's willing to step out. And again, if I'm on a 1-year deal as a manager, I'm doing everything I can, not only to save my job here, but also if I get blown out, make myself appealing for all 29 other teams that may be in need of a manager or bench coach or whatever the case may be. Because I want to keep working. You don't, as a former player, don't take a job as a coach or a manager because you're bored and you just want to get out of the house. No, it's because you genuinely want to do something. You want to impact the game. You want to impact the lives of players, and you want to do something. You want to win. And ultimately, I think that's what Phil wants. So it's tough for me to pass a grade on him. You know, I guess it's kind of a C-ish, B-. But the training wheels are still on. That's how I look at it.
Sure.
Yeah. He gets a D for me. I mean, so some of the moves that he's done with the bullpen and granted, I hear a lot of the player management of not sending the reliever out here because he just pitched the night before or 2 nights in a row, or, benching Trout here and there and some, the key position players. That's all coming from the top, from Perry. I do like that he has the players' backs. And from what I understand in talking to folks in the organization and just from their comments, the players' comments on Phil, they really like playing for him. But this team is a game under 500 at the All-Star break, and they were 8 games over 500, a week and a half ago? So I don't know.
Yeah.
It gets a D for me. I mean, you can give
The question
him
on that stretch when they were 8 games over 500, is that not the outlier of the season? I mean, think about it.
It could be.
I mean,
Right.
you look at the whole season as a whole. I mean, that's the outlier of the season.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. That's fair. What's the next one, Jeff?
I think we've answered, again, most of the rest of them just through our conversation. So I think we should wrap it up.
Well, I will say one thing, guys, before we wrap it up. The draft, the amateur draft, is coming up tonight, 6:00 Central Time, 4:00 Pacific Time. And again, I alluded to this earlier. There's a lot of good position players coming out of college that could move quick. And there's a couple guys I'm keeping an eye on. Jacob Gonzalez out of Ole Miss, shortstop, tons of power. Braden Taylor out of TCU, another great player. You probably know him full well, Victor, in calling some of those games.
Yep.
Braden Taylor, another guy, Nolan Shanuel. This guy is played for Florida Atlantic, and he's got the most disgusting slash line you'd ever see.
Disgusting.
I mean, a 615 on base percentage, and he slugged 868, and he's a tall first baseman. He's got power. He gets on base. He makes good contact. He's a guy that can rise quickly. And then lastly, if he falls to him, Chase Dollander from Tennessee Go Balls. And so he's a guy that is the best, collegiate pitcher in this draft. So you could see him go to the Angels as well. So there you go. There you have it.
Nice.
Yep.
The old breakdown. Jeff, what do you got? Hey Jeff, what did you bring to the table today?
I got, I think late rounds. Look for Colby Shade, center fielder out of Oregon. I think he's a potential diamond in the rough that they should be looking at. And it has nothing to do with the fact that he's from Colorado and may have played baseball with my kid.
What about Jacob Wilson? Do you guys know he's out of Grand Canyon?
Yeah.
Jacob Wilson. He's
Pretty
another
good player.
guy.
Jack Wilson's son.
Yeah, Jack Wilson's son. Yeah.
He had some injury issues this year. Kind of I think it was a hand issue on a play that he missed some time with. But he's an exciting player. He's a shortstop. Kind of a tall, lanky guy, and he's not a big dude, but he's got some thump in his bat. I didn't get a chance to watch a ton of his games, but that athleticism just jumps off the page, and he's kind of an exciting player. He's not at
another
the level
one.
he should be a top 10 unless, and I didn't watch any of the draft stuff that they did in Arizona, the pre-draft workouts and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Actually, I don't know that he worked out. I think he was there, but I'm not sure that he worked out. And another guy, Grand Canyon, Homer Bush.
Yes.
Remember Homer Bush, the outfielder for the Blue Jays? His son's a center fielder at Grand Canyon. He's draft eligible. He'll go.
Yep.
He'll more than likely go in the first or second round. I would imagine.
And then, here in Tennessee at a Vanderbilt, Enrique Bradfield at a Vanderbilt, mostly a contact speed guy, Juan Pierre type. He's,
that dude runs like the wind.
He does 80 grade speed. No power though, but makes contact, gets on base.
Yeah.
What were you going to say, Jeff? Sorry, I cut you off.
Sorry, go ahead, buddy.
Nope, that's it.
Sorry, Jeff.
Jeff's giving the old rap sign. This is the rap sign, Jeff.
Let's wrap
it up. Stretch it out. We need longer. We need more. Wrap it up.
Crunch this.
Starting to condense it. And this right here.
Right.
That's going to do it for episode 12 of the Angels Win podcast. For Jeff Stoddard and Chuck Richter, I'm Victor Ross. Thanks for listening. We will be back as far as recording 2 weeks from today with the All-Star break upon us and just 3 games next weekend for the Angels. We're going to take next week and just call it a hiatus, and we'll be back 2 weeks from today recording episode 13. So from all of us, thank you for listening and watching, and enjoy the All-Star break, everybody. Cheers.
Cheers, all.
Cheers, everybody.
Thank you for listening to the Angels Win podcast with Victor Rojas, Chuck Richter, and Jeff Stoddard. Go Halos and drive home safely.
Say goodbye.